Carolyn Glick. Carolyn is Deputy Managing Editor of the Jerusalem Post. She was born in the United States and made Aliyah to Israel immediately after graduation from Columbia University. After finishing her service in the Israel Defense Forces, Glick worked her way up to a key position in the Oslo negotiations under former Prime Minister Rabin. After retiring from the political sphere, Carolyn entered journalism. She now has a weekly column on the front page of the Jerusalem Post. At the beginning of the current war in Iraq, she was with the U.S. infantry unit that was first to reach Baghdad.
Today we find ourselves in a global war where the foundation of our shared values and culture as Jews and Christian is being threatened. And what are those core values that we share that make up who we are and how we conceive of the world? At the very core is the woman, because at the very core is an acknowledgement of the sanctity of human life. And the nefarious forces that we face in the war that we find ourselves in this generation don't share that core foundational value that brings us together as women and as human beings. Because the jihadist view of the world is that in the name of Islam, the forces of global jihad or global war are going to set out to dominate the world in the name of Islam. And the path of jihad, the path of war that is going to bring about this Islamic global domination is predicated not on the sanctity of life, but on the sanctity of death. This is a culture that does not share the most basic notion that makes us who we are. In fact, it contradicts that basic notion, both when we see women being exhorted from Ramallah to Rawalpindi in Pakistan to view their wombs not as the fountains of life, but as factories of death, that their greatest aspiration in life should be to raise children who become suicide bombers in the name of Allah. We have a Hamas member of the so-called Palestinian parliament who is a woman who has 3 sons who have already committed mass murder in the name of jihad and died. And she said openly, repeatedly, that her greatest aspiration is that her other 5 children should follow in their path. This is the idea that we are fighting. And as Martin Sherman said so eloquently just now, at its base, the war that we are fighting is a war of ideas. It is a war about the place of women. It is a war about the place of faith. But it is really a war about the place of life. And is life sacred or is it not? And of course we know that it is. And we also know that we cannot peacefully coexist with a civilization or a culture that thinks the opposite is the case, that life is not sacred. We can argue among ourselves, among Christians, among Jews, about when life starts and have various beliefs about that. But we all know that whenever it starts, it is sacred. It is sacred.